If you wanted to remotely turn on a lamp somewhere in your house, you could do that a number of different ways. Alexa, Google, whatever device you might have. But how was that accomplished back in the 1980s? Today we're going to find out on Vintage Geek. Just a quick reminder, if you like what you see today, please like and subscribe. It helps us a lot as we grow, but one of the things that helps us the most is if you would consider becoming a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website at vintagegeek.com. It's just under $20 a year and you get access to all of our videos commercial free. Again, that's vintagegeek.com. When we think about home automation today, we think about turning on various components in our home systems, whether it's lights in the living room, maybe a porch light. We can do all sorts of things now with modern devices like your Amazon Alexa and Google Nest and other things like that. But this concept's been around for a very long time. In the mid-70s, a company in Scotland actually developed a new protocol to be able to automate things in the home. It was a company called Pico Electronics, and the system became known as X10, I believe because it was their 10th engineering project. And the idea was to be able to control various devices around your household remotely. Now they did this using infrastructure that was already in place. In any house, you have an electrical grid that powers everything in your home using wiring. The engineers at this company developed a technology that would essentially create a radio wave that could be transmitted using the wires in your home, using a particular frequency. It comes out in a burst pattern. There's 4 bits that can tell devices what house they're in, and then there's another 4 bits that tell the device which address within the house you're trying to control. So in total, you're talking about 8 bits of information, which sounds super rudimentary, and it really was, but to be able to do this with existing infrastructure in the home was pretty cool at the time, and to be fair, this technology is still widely used around the world. In fact, it's one of the most standard home automation protocols even still today. One of the companies that adopted the X10 technology was RadioShack. They actually called it the plug-in power system. They integrated the plug-in power system with a number of different things that they sold in the stores. RadioShack made adapters that would work with their plug-in power system, and in the case of the color computer, it's actually just called the appliance and light controller. We actually do have a number of these X10 modules that we've acquired over time here at the Vintage Geek Museum, and I thought it'd be a great time and a great experiment to be able to really see how this was supposed to work, how it would actually interface with the color computer, and just see how practical this really would have been to use in your home back in the mid-1980s. So our color computer appliance and light controller set comes with a small controller device that actually plugs into the color computer that is essentially a little button panel. Now I appreciate the fact that they were able to match the design and kind of the overall aesthetic of this device to look like the color computer too. This controller has a series of 8 buttons on it, and these are used for turning on and off the various devices in your system. Obviously that wouldn't be able to control all of them, as you can have, I believe, a total of 16 devices in a household, and you can have multiple households as well. So the system is fairly expandable, but with the computer involved, you can actually control all of these devices through a single interface. The plug-in power controller plugs into the color computer via a cable using the standard cassette port interface. Now, as I mentioned, we do have a number of the modules for the X10 system. Most of the ones we have are the simple appliance controller modules. All these really do is they plug into a standard outlet in your home, and they have a plug-in on them to plug in the device that you're trying to control, and then you set the addressing accordingly. There are 2 knobs on each one of these devices that will set the household identifier, which is identified by a letter code. Then there's the number codes, which actually determine which device in your household this particular box is controlling. Pretty basic and straightforward. You could easily do this without having a computer involved at all. You simply dial up the address you want, you plug it in, and you're good to go as long as you've got a plug-in power controller somewhere in the system. So we're going to go ahead and set this up today and test a few different things in the system so we can see how the software works. I definitely want to try one of our cool vintage signs here in the museum. These signs are actually illuminated signs, so I thought it'd be fun today if we could use the plug-in power controller to actually turn the signs on and off. And then I thought, let's do something a little bit more like the home environment and to try something that's a little bit more true to the original intent of the product. So what would anyone in the mid-80s have in their living room? Of course, a television, and we've got plenty of those analog CRT type televisions here in the Vintage Geek Museum. This particular TV has a physical power on-off switch so that we can leave the power in the on state and be able to control it simply using the outlet. And I almost forgot to mention the other modules in the system. There are lamp modules that were available. The lamp modules actually provided different stages, which I assume was for different levels of brightness on the lamp. We're not going to use any of those today, but we have another module I thought was kind of cool, and that's the chime module. You can trigger this chime just like you would turn on an appliance in your house. So we've got one of these as well, and we're going to make that part of the test today. So in total, we actually have 4 different modules we're going to be looking at. I'm going to go ahead and give these modules addresses so that we can control them with the system. And to keep it super simple today, I'm going to use the letter A for the household, and I'm going to use positions 1 through 4 for the various devices. So addressing wise, I'm going to make the number 1 position the analog television set that we have. I'm going to make number 2 the Commodore sign. Number 3, I'm going to make that cool chime. And number 4 is going to be our big RadioShack sign in the background. Very simple to assign. You just use a simple screwdriver or any kind of a straight edge to be able to dial up the position on the device, and you can set the addresses very easily and then go ahead and plug in the modules. So we've got this all set up. We've got our different devices plugged in. We've got each of the controllers plugged in. Now I want to see what the software is like and see what we can do with it with our color computer too. The software for the plug-in power system comes on a cartridge. And one thing I found interesting, and we did prove this in some of our initial testing, is that the appliance controller cartridge does not work with the Color Computer 3. Apparently there's a graphics mode that it's utilizing, and that mode did not exist when the Color Computer 3 came out. So this only works on the Color Computer 1 and 2, and we've got the cartridge installed. After the splash screen, it's very cool. We've got the plug-in power screen here. Basically, you have a choice to start with. You can either do operate or install. Since we're just starting out, I'm going to go ahead and go to install so that we can set up our various devices and determine what they're for. There's different things you can do on a time schedule. So the first thing, of course, that it's going to ask is what is the time currently. I'm just going to leave this as is. It doesn't really matter for our demonstration today. We've got a grid here of the various rooms in the house. I assume you might be able to change the labels on these rooms. I'm not sure, but let's just go into one of the rooms and see what we've got. We'll start with the living room because, I mean, it's where you spend the most time, right? We've got some different letters going on here. Now, obviously, we were kind of playing around with this ahead of time. If I move this cursor around, which I can with the keys, I can basically move to different points of the room and be able to define different devices. So let's just delete the devices we have. Let's start from scratch here. Go ahead and place that TV first. So I'm going to go ahead and put that TV to the right of the couch. Now I'm guessing it's not going to let me put that on the wall, but let's find out. We can choose if it's a lamp or an appliance. In this case, we're going to use appliance for everything. So we've got some different appliances available here. This TV is a 13-inch RadioShack, so I'm going to go with the smaller TV on this. It does not appear that the system will allow me to place a TV on the wall. What can I put on the wall? How about a custom device? Looks like it's defaulting to unit code 1, which makes sense. It's the first one, but we're not going to do that because 1 is our television. So let's assume that this position on the wall is where we want our Commodore sign. So I'm going to change this to code 2, set appliance module to code A2, enter to continue. So now we've got our Commodore sign on the wall in this illustration. Now let's see where we can put the television. We're going to have to put it in one of these floor positions. So I'm going to put it to the right of the couch. Oh, now we've got the actual labels. Let me try to put that small TV back in. All right, there's our TV. It's looking good, and the screen seems to be facing the wrong direction. But, you know, you can't have everything. For our chime, I want to put the chime outside. So let's see what we've got. I'm going to put the chime in the front. Can't tell if that's supposed to be a position we can use here. We can put it right next to the door. Great. This one's going to be custom because they don't actually have a chime showing here, and that would be unit code 3 for our chime. Set it to A3. Okay, great. All right, so we've got our chime on the front of the house. And where do we want to put our big RadioShack sign? Of course, in the kitchen. All right, next unit code is 4. That should work. So now we've defined our 4 devices in the software. Now we're going to try to operate these devices using the program. So if I go into operate mode, first thing we're going to do is we're going to go into the living room. I want to turn on that TV remotely. Maybe I just woke up and I'm thinking, you know, really ought to let that analog CRT warm up a little bit before I head down the stairs. So let me use my Coco 2 that just happens to be next to the bed to control this and turn on the television. I'm going to go to choose the unit to operate, which will be right here at this A1, right on the TV. Now you can choose on, off, or skip here. I'm going to choose on, and then it's going to ask me, when do I want to do it? And this is where you would be able to set a schedule if you wanted to set the TV to turn on at certain times, but we just want to turn the TV on for right now. So let's give this a try and see if we can turn on our television using the plug-in power controller. After a bit of warm-up time, we have our television. All right, this is working well so far. Let's make sure that we can turn the TV off. Saturday morning cartoons are done. We gotta shut this thing down. We want to do it now. And our TV is off. All right, things are working out pretty well with the X10 so far. Now let's give our Commodore sign a try. Of course, it's up here on the back wall in our interface. So if I go to A2, We're going to do the same thing. We're going to try turning it on, and we're going to do this now. So let's turn on our Commodore sign. Haha, things are going well. We'll make sure we can turn that one off. It's funny because there is a little bit of delay in the system. You can almost sense that the bursts are being sent over the power lines, and then you see it happen. There's also an LED indication on the actual plug-in power controller that does light up when a signal is being sent. It gives you some idea that something's happening, which is probably pretty helpful if you're troubleshooting something or one of the modules isn't working the way you think it should. So let's get out of the living room. Let's take a look at the front of the house now and see if we can activate our chime. We've got our A3 right over here. Now the chime, I think, is supposed to just be an on command. There really isn't any need to turn it off. It just goes on and makes the chime, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So let's go ahead and try to turn this on, and let's activate our chime. Oh, like that extra beat at the end. That's quite a bit of fun. Chime seems to work out great. Again, I'm not sure what that would be for unless you were using the X10 as some kind of a doorbell system. That's the only thing I could think of right off the bat, but it does work, and it works with this. Even though it's only designed to control appliances and lamps, it can work the same way. And now we have the final test to see if we can activate our large RadioShack sign in the background. So of course for this, we're gonna have to enter the kitchen where all good RadioShack signs live. And we've got our A4 up here on the wall. Let's see what we can do here. Let's turn on the RadioShack sign. All right. Pretty impressed with the X10 controller. I like what it can do, and I can see where this would be useful in the household at that time. Now, granted, you would have to have a color computer in some place that makes sense to control all these devices, which could be problematic depending on what you're trying to control, but certainly for the technology available at the time, it's pretty cool, and I like the color computer implementation of this using the RadioShack system. Everything looks pretty good, and I guess just for good measure, we should try just turning on all of the devices here at the end. So let's see if we can do that. Let's turn on the TV. There it goes. And then we'll turn on our Commodore sign. And then of course, we've got to get that one last chime in here, and we'll activate the chime. Honestly, it seems like the kind of chime that you would hear going into a RadioShack store, now that I'm thinking about it and remembering back to my youth. So there you have it. The X10 controller works as expected, and the appliance controller software for the color computer works really well overall, and I'm pretty impressed with this product. I'm really glad that we have these components and that we were able to give this a try. Always wanted to see what the system worked like when I was a kid, and being able to experiment with this today has been a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this video and topics about vintage technology, please like and subscribe, and consider becoming a Vintage Geek member. You can do that at the website, and for just under $20 a year, you get access to all of our content commercial free, plus a few bonus extras as well. It's all at vintagegeek.com. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek. Until next time, I'm Aaron, and this has been Vintage Geek.
Killed it.
Thanks.
That went super. That was awesome.